So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I'm Ian Zajac from IC Intercom. We're manufacturers of the brands Intellinet and Manhattan. Today we're going to be talking about PoE and some PoE solutions and where PoE has come from and the course of PoE and some of the cooler products that we have in Intellinet that actually help you out with the installations. All right, so let's talk about some PoE solutions here. So first off, just want to go over the brand and what we do. Intellinet has been around about 28 years now, and we manufacture many different categories underneath networking products. As you can see here, we do everything from PoE switches, the injectors, the extenders, all sorts of data switches that many of you know us for, as well as we have a full solution of passive networking too when it comes to copper patch cables. We do Cat5, we do Cat6, we do Cat6A, as well as slim patch cables. We also do many different patch panels like Cat5e and Cat6 patch panels, wall mount cabinets. We do fiber cables up to 25 meters. And then we also do keystone jacks, wall plates, all your different tools and testers, different SFPs for all your different switches, and then fiber optic media converters. So we're kind of like a full solution manufacturer for the different installers and integrators out there to come to and have different options as opposed to some of our competition out there. We try to help you guys come together with a full solution for those installers and integrators. So today we're going to focus a little bit on PoE technology, where we are with it today, where we're going with PoE technology, and some of the products that actually integrate with those technologies. I want to talk about some really cool solution products that Intellinet has too when you're out there in the field and you're doing different type of installations. Some of the products that you can go out there with confidence knowing that they actually solve some of the solutions for you that you may not be aware of. So let's jump right into it, some of the content today. First, I want to talk about the very basics. So what is PoE? That's pretty simple. It's just power and it's data through a single cable, whether it's a Cat5e, a Cat6, or a Cat6a cable, going to your endpoint device. And what does that mean for you? And I'll explain that in the next slide. But what that means is basically you can have power to those devices without having to have a regular AC power outlet nearby or anything like that. You can actually power the units with a simple patch cable from either an injector or a PoE switch. As you can see here in the drawing, you got an access point, you got a VoIP phone, you got a security camera. There's many different devices out there that take PoE. But with power and data being allowed to go up to 328 feet, you got a lot of versatility with power over Ethernet. So why PoE, number one? Well, of course, installation cost savings. Like I said before, not having to have an electrician come out and put an AC outlet right by your IP camera or by your phones. Everybody going with IP phones, and now all you have to have is a patch cable plugged directly into them. It saves on your installation cost savings because you're not having to do multiple cables. It allows the flexibility and simplicity because you're not having to have, you can pretty much have those devices anywhere you want as long as it's within the restraints of power and data. And going back to that, that is 328 feet is the max distance you can go without having to do an extender or an existing PoE splitter extender. So it allows you to go further distances and have that the flexibility and simplicity to have those devices anywhere. It also gives you fewer points of failure because if you have a simple PoE switch going with a patch cable to your device, you know it's only one of the three devices that could be the failure in that particular unit. You're not having to worry about the AC, if it's working right for the electricity, but you either have your PoE switch go bad, it's a bad patch cable, or it's a bad IP camera or access point or whatever you might have in that particular installation. And then, of course, centralized power management. That means all your power is going to be coming from either a PoE switch or a PoE injector. And even a PoE injector has to have data from another device. So that means it's going to be one of 2 points of failure, and your centralized power management is going to be in that particular device. And you can see at the bottom there, all the different devices out there that people are using for PoE, from IP cameras to your WAPs to your access control LED lighting is now becoming bigger and bigger in the market. HDMI over IP for anybody doing the AV installs, door phones and cameras, the different POS systems, LCD monitors, laptops, and a bunch of different digital signage out there right now too. So what I wanted to do is kind of go over the beginning where PoE started. And PoE started with the IEEE 802.3 AF technology. And what that allowed you to do is have up to 15.4 watts dispersed with your switches on every single port. And you can see in the actual pairs of cable used in an eight pair of Cat5e or Cat6 cable, you're only using 2 pairs of wire in this particular instance. And then the next step up, you'll see the IEEE 802.3 AT technology. That's 25.5 watts. Most people in the industry know it as 30 watts. They actually do push 30 watts, but the industry standard is actually 25.5. It too uses only 2 pairs of wire. Then they took a step up and said, we're going to come out with something called Ultra PoE or High PoE. That's where you go to 4 pairs being used, and that's the IEEE 802.3 BT technology, where you're using 4 pairs of wire. And there's and if you look at the third line there, it says dynamic power allocation. Now, why is that important? Because when you're using 802.3 AF technology back in the day, that technology would push 15.4 watts to the device whether it needed it or not. So what's nice about the dynamic power allocation is if you're using an IEEE 802.3 AT or 30 watt device, it's only going to ask for the amount of wattage it needs. So if the camera only needs 7 watts, it's only going to push 7 watts down the line. Same with an access point. If it asks for 18 watts out of 30, it's only going to push 18 watts, and the rest of it is dispersed to the rest of the power budget. That's what's nice about dynamic power allocation. And same with the 802.3 BT and the BT Type 4. You can see it jump from 60 all the way up to 100 watts. And we do have products in each one of these categories now. So depending on the type of wattage or the type of installation you're doing, we do have a solution for almost all those, especially when it comes to injectors, which we'll show here in a second. So some common PoE technology I wanted to go over. Number 1 is PSE, so power sourcing equipment. Your power sourcing equipment is basically your switches. Okay, your switches are the main product that actually supplies power to all of your endpoint devices like your access points, IP cameras, and IP phones. And then the PD devices, of course, those, you know, or I would call endpoint device is another word for it, is your cameras, access points, and phones. Then if you have your mid-span devices, which include your injectors or your PoE patch panels. The reason they call it mid-span is because it is in the middle of the span. So you have your data switch that is going to supply data to your injector. And then from your injector, which does have to be plugged into the wall, you're going to have power and data going out to your endpoint devices. So end-span is just the opposite. So you got your end-span device, which is your PoE switch. It is supplying power directly to your endpoint devices, and that's why they call it end-span. And then another really common technology term in PoE is your power budget. Power budget is very important to pay attention to for you, your customers, your installers, even the end users to know how much power they have in their budget on that particular PoE switch or device. Because if they're hooking up multiple devices, you want to know how much power each device takes in terms of wattage and how much power budget you have left over. On each one of our products, we state on the packaging or in the specs exactly how much power budget you have. So you can easily tell right away out the gate how much power budget you have to work with on each particular device. So first we're going to talk about PoE injectors. I kind of talked about it a second ago, talking about mid-span. So this kind of gives you a little bit of an idea how it works. So in this particular case, you have a fast Ethernet switch. It's just a regular 16-port switch. What it does is it's going to supply data to the data in port on the PoE injector. Now the PoE injector does on the other side of it have a power port, so you're going to have to plug it into some sort of AC power. And then you've got one cable that goes out of the PoE injector to your endpoint device, whether it's an IP camera, whether it is a IP phone or an access point. In this particular case, we're using an IP camera, and we're supplying power and data up to 328 feet. Now that's key. 328 feet is as far as you can go from that particular injector to that device. Now in this instance, you can see there's a data switch before providing data to the injector. So you can actually go from the data switch 328 feet to the injector, and then that injector has to have a power source and then go an additional 328 feet. So you are getting 660 feet with the data, but you have to have a power source in between. So we're going to kind of go over some of the options real quick we have in injectors. Some of these are new to some of you, and some of them you may not have seen before. We have the 524179, which is your entry level 15.4 watts. So that's the 802.3 AF that we were talking about earlier, where you get 15.4 watts. It's your basic injector. It's 10100. It's not gigabit. That would be your entry level injector. Then we have two different options in the 30 watt injectors. One is going to be more of a plastic housing, and the other one's just a metal housing. And you see they're both 30 watts. So that's your 802.3 AT. And then we take a step up, and you see we have three other models there. One is 60, one is 95, and the last one is kind of separated by itself a little bit, and I'll explain that in a second. The 60 watt model is your ultra PoE. That's our 561235. That gives you basically 60 watts of power down that with power and data to your endpoint device. And then we have the 95 watt, same exact scenario. That's going to be your class 4 technology, where you're getting 95 watts also down a single patch cable. And I do highly recommend, by the way, once you get to ultra PoE, to using Cat6 cable. I've heard some instances out there where people use it over Cat5e. It does work, but Cat6 is known to basically keep that continuity in the cable for the power and data. Our next step here is our 561488. Now this is a pretty cool product in the fact that you have data going in one port, and I don't have a blown up image here, but I'd like to show it to you guys. The 561488 has an in port on the far right hand side. You go in with your data from your data switch, and preferably a gigabit switch, because this does have gigabit speeds. As you see, all the last 5 options here all have the capabilities of doing gigabit speeds, but this last one, you go into the data port, and then you have 2 ports out. One is going to be a total of 50 watts output, and the other one's going to be a total of 30 watts output. So if you do have that particular item that needs to be powered with more than 30 watts, now you have something that could do two. Basically, let's say you have a camera that takes 36 watts and you have a camera that takes just under 30. Now you can have those going to the same location. Both of them can go 328 feet out of that particular injector. So those are really our PoE injector options that you guys have at this time. Next, we're going to show you a little bit about PoE extenders. Now, PoE extenders give you that extra distance. If you're not familiar with PoE extenders, it allows you to take that extra distance and go an additional 328 feet, and in some cases much further. So in this, what you see here on this diagram is you got a gigabit ultra PoE injector. That's our 561235. That one gives you 60 watts out. And what's taking that particular power and data out is going into our 2-port gigabit ultra PoE extender. So you're taking 6 watts, 60 watts out of your injector, injecting those 60 watts into the in port on your PoE extender, and now you can split that and go another 328 feet out to 2 devices. So essentially you're now at 660 feet where your 2 endpoint devices are at. So this allows you to go a lot further with a simple 2-port extender and go out further. Now we got several different options in extenders, and I'm going to go into a couple in detail on a couple of these, but I wanted to show you all the different options, and we got a couple new ones here too that we just introduced. So the first option here is the 560962. You see, this is an indoor model only, not outdoor at all. I have people that actually put them in housings and stuff like that. So they put them in a NEMA box and allows you to extend up, but it's mainly used for indoor use. Now, you'll see that it says a number of daisy chains, and I'll go over that in the next slide, but it allows you to go further than the traditional 328 feet, and I'll show you how here in a second. But you do get 30 watts out of this, so this is true 802.3 AT technology, and you can get up to 1,968 feet total, so I'll show you that here also on the next slide. The next one is our outdoor model. Same exact concept as the indoor model, but just an outdoor housing. And then our next one is the 561266. This is our indoor model. So this gives you that 30 watts. So the first slide I introduced to you guys on the indoor extenders, I showed you the 60 watt model. This is our 30 watt model. It is less expensive of a model because of course it can only do 30 watts, but we also have the 60 watt model. Both of them are in with power and data and then split off to two different devices. So you have a 30 watt and a 60 watt model with the new 561600. And then our last introduction, which just, I think we just got this in last week, is our 561648. This too can accept up to 60 watts in. This is outdoor rated. It is IP68 rated, so it's extremely, it can go in harsh conditions. It can go direct rain contact. Matter of fact, it can be submerged up to a certain amount of time, but it's perfect for outdoor conditions. This allows 60 watts in and then can be split to two going out at 30 watts apiece. Now you got to remember the one thing is every time it injects power from a single port injector or a switch into one of these devices, you do lose about 4 watts. And you want to keep that in mind out there in the field, that if you're injecting 60 watts, you're going to lose about 4 watts. So you have about 56 watts to split between the other two ports when you split out. But you can see the distances that you can get out of these PoE extenders. So to give you an even better example on that indoor extender we were just talking about, when we talk daisy chain, it'll allow you to daisy chain up to 5 of these for that total of 1,968 feet. This is a very, very popular model for us because it's like a Band-Aid product model. It allows you to basically daisy chain up to 5 times, and each time you got to remember that you're going to lose that 4 watts that I was talking about. So let's take this example here. You got a PoE switch. It's injecting 30 watts into your first PoE extender, the 560962. After you inject it, it's going to lose 4 watts because it takes 4 watts to power the device to send it back out another 328 feet. That's why you see here at the first interval, you're going to lose up to, you're going to be at 24.59 watts because you lose between 4 and 6 watts on those particular devices as you daisy chain them every single time. And at the fifth daisy chain here, you're going to see that we're down to 8.6 watts total at 1,968 feet. But now you're able to go these long distances with the IP cameras. Okay. All right. So our next model is our outdoor model. Same exact scenario. Now this one can only daisy chain 4 times. You cannot go 5 times with it, but you're still able to get 1,628 feet total with all these added up. Again, every time you daisy chain, you're losing 4 watts. So as an installer integrator, you want to make sure that they understand that. When they're out there in the field, hey, you can use this, but just remember, every single time you install one of these, you're losing 4 watts when you daisy chain them in a row. This allows you to get a lot longer distances. I did have a customer one time actually setting up a barn where they needed basically PoE cameras out there. And along the fence line, they ran these every 300 feet, put them up on a fence post, and kept going down, down, down. I think they went 990 feet to the actual barn to able to get those cameras out to where they needed, and it works just fine. These are, again, IP65 rated. You don't want to submerge them, but they are completely sealable, all aluminum housing, and they got the rubber grommets on the outside that cinch down on the cables themselves. Now we're going to jump into PoE switch options. We've got several different PoE switch options. You have unmanaged switches. You have LCD managed switches. You got PoE pass-through switches, which we're going to talk about here in a second too. But we have all sorts of different options. You got 5, 8, 16, 24, and 48 port switches with fiber or without fiber copper uplinks. We've got new industrial models that can be in much harsher environments when it comes to temperature, dust proof, that type of switch. And then of course we got all the different options when it comes to ultra PoE, AT technology, and 15.4 watt. I would say about 95% of our switches are AT compatible or above. We only have a couple switches in our lineup now that are 15.4 AF technology, but we have multiple switches within that realm now that you guys will be able to take a look at on the Intellinet site. So first we're going to talk about PoE Passthrough, because this is one product that has been very, very strong for us for several reasons. Number one, it solves a problem for a lot of the installers and integrators out there. So if you need to basically have power and data within 328 feet of several different devices, you're going to be able to through these IP phones. Or through these IP cameras or access points. So the way this works is you got a PoE switch that actually supplies power and data to our PoE switch PoE pass-through switches, our 561082 there. So from 328 feet from your regular PoE switch to this PoE pass-through switch, you're already at that distance of 328 feet. Now you can go an additional 328 feet and pass that power through that particular PoE pass-through switch out to your devices. Now you're at 660 feet with 4 devices. And again, you're passing 30 watts into the PoE switch, and the switch is actually only taking 4 watts of power, very similar to the PoE Extenders, but it's passing through the power up to 26 watts out to 4 devices. So if you've got a couple cameras, let's say it's a 2 megapixel or a 3 megapixel camera, it's only taking up to 6 or 7 watts. This is the perfect type of solution device for that. It does come with a regular DC adapter, so if you want to plug it into the wall, it'll act as a regular PoE switch as well. So you'll get 4 ports of PoE that you can have up to a 68 watt power budget, or you can do the PoE pass-through with it, which is a key feature, because now you can pass through the power, be at 330 feet before you even extend out to your devices. So it actually gives you an additional 330 feet if you use the PoE pass-through. We do now have actually an 8-port model of this, which is pretty exciting. It's in a hardened industrial casing too. It's our 8-port Gigabit Ethernet PoE pass-through switch. Now this one does not come with its own power adapter because of course it's hardened DIN rail mountable. So you just have to buy a DIN rail mountable power supply. But it does the same thing. So what's really nice about this is it will accept up to 95 watts from a 95 watt injector. And this is the reason I'm showing you this, is in this particular slide, you can see that we have a 24 port Gigabit Ethernet switch. It's going to supply data to your Gigabit Ultra PoE injector there, which is the middle device. And then out from that device, you're going to get 95 watts of power injected into the 8-port PoE pass-through switch. Then you have 7 watts to go out to your devices with about a 90 watt power budget. So now you can have multiple devices, up to 7 devices with a 90 watt power budget to play with. So if you've got multiple cameras that are only pulling 7 to 10 watts, in this particular case, you'd be perfect. So that's one of our brand new switches. You can see it has a 120 watt power budget if you fully power up the switch with a hardened DIN rail mount power supply. And those will be available from us soon here as well to go with our PoE lineup of industrial switches. Armando is going to be answering some of the questions as we go along. I see some of the questions coming through, so he should be able to answer some of those as we're going. So let's talk about LCD unmanaged switches. So I see that there's an LCM. It's actually LCD-M unmanaged. We've got several different options in LCD switches that are all unmanaged switches. And why are they unmanaged? Because in a managed switch, you're able to view the type of power being used when you log into a switch and see what type of power is being used per port. In an unmanaged switch, you can't. So we put LCD displays directly on the front of these switches so you can see each and every port and how much wattage is being used as it's being used. In this particular case, we're showing 2 different ones. We're showing our 16 port 561259 and our 561242 24 port. Both of them have a 370 watt basically power budget. And again, that's a power budget we're talking about. That's a usable power budget. So if you happen to deploy on the 24 port switch 10 watts across all 24 ports, you're perfectly fine because you're only using 240 watts total and you have a 370 watt power budget to play with. On the port status, you can see there on the LCD screen, you're able to see exactly how much power each device is pulling. And on this particular case, you can see port 1 is pulling 4.8 watts, port 2 is pulling 6.2. This is how it'll be displayed, and it'll actually show you your power budget left over as well. These are becoming more and more popular, just so when somebody installs a switch, let's say you install an 8-port PoE switch, and that 8-port PoE switch has 4 cameras in it right now. your customer asks you to come back and install 3 more cameras later on, you want to know how much power budget's left over, you'll be able to easily see it directly on the front because it tells you how much power budget you had and how much power budget's been used. So these are really, I mean, really no extra expense in the switch itself, other than the fact that you got an LCD screen and you're able to monitor exactly how much power is being used in those devices. So now we're going to talk about Intellinet managed switches, Intellinet PDM, which we call power device monitoring. Power device monitoring basically helps stop those different truck rolls from going out and the customers getting a call saying, hey, you know, I've got cameras down, I need to reboot automatically. What it'll do is the switch has built into the firmware. It has basically into the firmware has built to where it will automatically ping that device every 5 seconds. It'll send out a ping to make sure that IP camera, that IP phone, or that access point is up and working. This is really good in the point of cameras because cameras are one of the nuisance products that always go down and need rebooted on a somewhat semi-regular basis. So what happens is it'll ping that device every 5 seconds. If it ever notices that particular device is down, it'll automatically reboot that port all by itself. This is default, and it's already set up in all of our Intellinet PDM switches. The other thing is you don't need to monitor this all the time with our Intellinet PDM because it's already monitoring it all by itself. It'll constantly always reboot that device every 5 seconds. After the ping is going back and forth, it'll reboot the entire switch if needed. All right, so a couple things on the PDM is that when it does reboot, it'll send a ping, like I said, every 5 seconds. But you could set the default as you want to set the default. So if you want it to be every 10 seconds, it could set you can set the default to be every 10 seconds to reboot that device, or you can have it reboot every 20 seconds, however you want to set the parameters within the firmware. Also, when the device does restart, it usually gives it a time frame of when it wants to come back on. So if it does get shut off, you could set the parameter, hey, I don't want it to shut up, I don't want it to turn back on for another 10 seconds or so. And you could set it for that parameter too. So you got a lot of things that you could do with it, with the Intellinet PDM by itself. The good thing is you don't have to constantly monitor it. Now there are different ones out there from other brands and stuff like that do have cloud management that you can charge lease fees for and all that kind of stuff. Which we did take the next step, and we are going to be partnering with Domotz, which is part of my next slide here, and all of our managed switches, and we'll be doing a full webinar just on Domotz itself with Intellinet and how Domotz will work with Intellinet, basically as a full cloud solution for monitoring all your different devices out there from access points, cameras, and IP phones. Now, we have a lot of new products come out. Anytime you guys get a chance, go to view the Intellinet website. A lot of our new products are right up front and in your face on the Intellinet website as they come out. So definitely take a constant look at the Intellinet website. I will go ahead and take some questions now because that was the end of our presentation. If anybody has any questions, you can either contact myself or Armando, and we can answer any type of questions for you. Thank you for your time, and have a great day.